All right, we're back to dig into the methodology section. This time, we're really going to focus on a critical piece of the puzzle: the participants. I mean, who exactly took part in this study? It's a big deal because understanding who they are is absolutely key to making sense of the findings.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a bird's eye view of everyone involved. Then we're going to zoom in on each of the learner groups one by one: the beginners, the intermediates, and the advanced learners. After that, we'll talk about the native speaker control group, which is super important.
Okay, so let's get started with that big picture. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the different skill levels, what was the overall makeup of the people in this research? Let's lay that foundation. The total number he worked with was 24 individuals. So that's our starting point, the foundation for all the acoustic analysis we're going to be talking about later. Now, this group of 24 breaks down into two main categories. You've got 21 Native American English speakers who are learning French, and then you have a control group of 3 native French speakers. What's really interesting here is that every single participant came from the exact same environment, a big public university right in the American Midwest. This is great because it gives a really consistent background for the whole study. All right, first up, let's dive into the beginner group, and you'll see we're using the color blue to represent them throughout this breakdown. So the beginner group was made up of 7 L2 learners, and you're going to see that number, 7, pop up again for the other learner groups, which is a great way to keep the comparisons nice and balanced. So what makes someone a beginner in this study? Well, most of them were in their very first or second semester of college French. There were a couple of interesting exceptions, though. One student was actually in an intermediate class, but he included them here since they had just finished those first 2 beginner courses. And another one had taken some French back in high school. But here's the really important part for this group, and for the others too. None of them had ever lived in a French-speaking country. Okay, moving on up, let's talk about the intermediate group, which we've highlighted in green. How do they stack up? And just like the beginners, we're looking at another group of 7 students. See that pattern? So what set these learners apart? Well, they were all enrolled in 2000-level French courses, your 3rd or 4th semester. And every single person in this group had already finished at least one intermediate course before the study. And just like the beginners, none had ever lived in a French-speaking country, and they didn't report speaking any other languages fluently besides English. All right, following that same pattern, we come to our third and final group of learners, the advanced students. And you'll see them highlighted here in purple. And you guessed it, we've got another balanced group of 7 L2 learners. This makes comparing across the different proficiency levels really straightforward. These students were taking some pretty serious courses, things like advanced conversation, advanced composition, and even intro to translation. But here's that crucial point again, and it applies to all 21 learners. Even at this advanced stage, none of them had ever lived in a French-speaking country. This is such a key part of the study's design. It helps ensure that the differences he finds are likely coming from classroom learning, not from being immersed in the language. Okay, so we've got our 3 groups of learners. But how do you actually measure their progress? You need a benchmark, right? A gold standard to compare them to. And that's exactly where the native speaker control group comes in, shown here in gray. This was a smaller group made up of just 3 native French speakers. And their profile is totally different, as you'd expect. All 3 were from France, they were all between 20 and 22 years old, and they were actually international students studying at that same US university. Interestingly, they themselves were advanced learners of English. So their native French vowel production is what provides that crucial baseline that all the learner speech gets compared against.